None of us is an island. We're all interconnected. That has come home to roost. And we've got to recognise, by the way, on this point about shutting the borders, how many right-wingers have you heard say that for years, as though it's something you just click your fingers? What we need is safe and legal routes.
Have basic border security so we don't have terrorists coming into our country on the small boats.
Safe and legal routes for asylum.
This green world that we're going to live in is terrifying. We're going to...
This is the brilliant Professor Matt Goodwin debating a Green Party MP. As he said, just listening to them is terrifying. They are anti-British left-wing extremists. Labour on steroids. It is as simple as that. They never talk about the British people, as you'll hear. It's always the global community. His face tells 1,000 words. They want open borders and to hand the country over to the third world. They'd happily make the Palestine or the Pride flag our national flag. The fact that they even discuss Britain is laughable. We wouldn't exist as a nation if they were in power. As the professor said, we need to spend more on defence, but we also need to secure our borders and stop importing terrorists. If we stopped spending $10 billion a year on housing those illegal immigrants we are importing, that would free up the money for defence. Of course, the Green Party MP disagrees and thinks we should be increasing the number of asylum seekers we take in. These are people who would give refuge to Hamas and Hezbollah. They are a national security threat to Britain. And it's people who think like them that rule this country, even if they aren't members of the same political party. People with this worldview are prevalent throughout Labour, the Lib Dems, and possibly even the Conservatives, so they have a major majority in Parliament. The Green Party are just the most extreme side of the anti-British woke politics. Well done, Matthew Goodwin. Take a watch.
But the idea that you buy security by buying more bombs is ridiculous. It's not the right way to think about security. We should be having a much broader conversation about what real human security looks like. If you look at, in the last 10 years, what was it that killed hundreds of thousands of people in the UK? It was COVID. If you look at what's going to cause us the most economic damage in coming decades, it's climate change. We should be thinking about security with much broader parameters, cyber security as well. Instead, we've got people who are talking about, the government a couple of weeks ago in its strategic defence review, committing to paying £15 billion to buy new nuclear warheads, incredibly expensive weapons that can and should never, ever be used, effectively breaching our obligations under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and trying to justify it on the basis of arguing that this is somehow an investment in British industry. The subsidy per job is £1 million per job for those sorts of things.
So you wouldn't
Other
increase,
sorts of industries are far more economically beneficial.
You wouldn't increase defence spending? What do you
So increasing defence spending is obviously what we've got to do in order to secure the security of our country and indeed Europe. We've been living in a security blanket provided by the United States for so long, and understandably they're irritated. Here's one thing you could do to raise that money while also actually improving the security and safety of the British people. You could raise at least a quarter of that immediately by fixing our borders and stopping the small boats, which is costing between £7 and £10 billion every year, and we know has been used by Iranian terrorists to come into our country. Labour could make, as you say, a tough choice by fixing our borders. We could dramatically reduce the amount of welfare that we pay. We could also continue to drive down the foreign aid budget until we can actually provide security for our own people. There's a few ideas.
So, yeah, I think I need to come back. Just briefly on Ellie. Look, I'm fond on Ellie, and there's lots we fond of Ellie, lots we agree on, particularly on the European Union. I'm worried about the position of the Green Party on NATO. Over the years, it's wanted to withdraw from NATO. I believe it currently wants to be a member, but there is a leadership contest going along at the moment where one of the leading candidates wants to pull us out. OK, fine, but it's caused real confusion and concern among voters. It has, and look, security matters, and it matters to people. Right now, we have 200,000 Ukrainians who I'm so pleased we have welcomed with open arms into this country, who are fleeing conflict in mainland Europe. But this is desperately serious. And that's why defence spending matters.
And for 20 years prior to that, this country basically appeased Putin. We cannot separate out defence as in guns and bombs and, you know, arms and people killing people, from a much broader, longer-term conversation about what real security means, which is why it's so totally counterproductive and short-sighted to slash the aid budget in order to spend more on weaponry, because the aid budget, development and diplomacy are key to building peace globally. None of us is an island. We're all interconnected. That has come home to roost. And we've got to recognise, by the way, on this point about shutting the borders, how many right-wingers have you heard say that for years, as though it's something you just click your finger? What we need is safe and legal routes.
Have basic border security so we don't have terrorists coming into our country on the small boats.
Safe and legal routes.
I mean, this green world that we're going to live in is terrifying. We're going to appease Putin while not having nuclear bombs.
I just talked about appeasing Putin. I just said that this country appeased Putin for far too long.
How can you appease Putin while simultaneously getting rid of nuclear weapons?
Nuclear weapons do not make the world a safer place.
Right, so how do you think Putin's going to take us seriously?
They make it a more dangerous place. The West having nuclear weapons hasn't stopped Putin invading Ukraine, has it? It hasn't made us safe. And on borders, as we've seen, as Andrew talked about, we welcomed hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian refugees fleeing conflict to this country.
Genuine refugees.
Because we created safe and legal routes. Are you saying Are you saying the only genuine refugees in the world are the ones that come from Ukraine and Hong Kong?
I'm saying we should fix the borders and stop the boats.
That is the effect of our policies.
Okay.
We should create safe and legal routes for asylum seekers to come here.
By the way, the government
Let's return to the NATO summit.
hasn't come back on this.
Because